Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then we consider what you know of the news of the day. All eyes will be on Parliament as it reconvenes for a special sitting on Monday after being shuttered for 7 months. Now, what will happen during the 5-day sitting of Dewan Rakyat? Will it live up to the expectations by many stakeholders that Parliament play its role in managing the multiple crises that we face? So tonight we'll discuss what the benchmarks might be in assessing whether this parliamentary sitting is cosmetic or substantial. The former Speaker of Dewan Rakyat joins us now, Tan Sri Muhammad Arif Muhammad Yusof. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Now, this special parliamentary sitting, it's not an ordinary session, it's a special sitting. How does the rules of the procedure for a special session differ from that of a regular session? I mean, does the role of the Speaker change?
To some extent, the role of the Speaker changes. By virtue of it being a special sitting, the sitting of Parliament will be called upon the request by the Prime Minister. And it will be the Prime Minister who will set the agenda or the business to be discussed at the special meeting. However, even though it is a special meeting, one would expect that the normal parliamentary procedures and expectations will, of course, be adhered to. So if it falls short of the normal expectations, then even a special sitting can be criticized. You know? I mean, people will not look too kindly to the proceedings if it doesn't meet that threshold. You know? Of course, the special sitting now has been requested by the Prime Minister and Cabinet inter alia to discuss, ministerial statements. I think the essence of it is still some, tabling or discussion of ministerial statements, of 5 ministerial statements, the way I understand it. Because I'm like most people, I've only got the AUM or Aturan Urusan Mesyuarat just today, quite late in the day to have it. And looking at the AUM, which basically means the order paper or the order book, we see ministerial statements being there. That's in the forefront. We also see the tabling of the so-called risalat, or in English, papers. And this pertain to the proclamations of emergency. There are about 3 of proclamations of emergency which will be tabled, as well as numerous ordinances done or made under those proclamations of emergency. They will be tabled. But this is where I think I'm a bit disappointed looking at the Aturan Urusan Mesyuarat. The tabling seems to me to be a formality, because once you categorize it as tabling of risalat or papers, you're equating the proclamations of emergency and the ordinances, which are done via the Constitution, mind you, as ordinary statutory papers. Now, this is not really something that personally I was hoping to see. But there you are. I mean, looking at the order book.
Tan Sri, can I ask you if we could have had a regular sitting? Was there anything stopping the government from having a full parliamentary session, considering that we've had no parliament for 7 months?
Yes, there is nothing. You're right. There's nothing to stop the cabinet, Prime Minister and cabinet, from asking that the parliament be reconvened for another meeting, the ordinary meeting, because parliament has not been prorogued. You see, since parliament has not been prorogued, we are still in the current session. The new session will be ushered in only when parliament is open, when you have the Titah Diraja and so on and so forth. That will happen once you have a prorogation. So you're quite right. There is nothing in the standing orders to prohibit the government from actually having an ordinary meeting for a few days. And then you will have the full works of the parliamentary processes coming into play, and questions, oral questions, ministerial questions, debates, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, it's not done that way. It's done by way of a special sitting. Now, lots of questions have been asked over the last few weeks. if it's a special sitting and you're going to listen to ministerial statements, will there be an actual debate? There is, the fine print in the AUM, in the Aturan Urusan Mesyuarat, which seems to indicate there will be some sort of debate. It says there, Yang Berhormat can ask questions, can make observations to the minister concerned, after which the minister will reply. It seems like a debate that will be in process, but you never know. But if the thrust of it is just to ask questions, then it will not be a debate. A debate will entail not just asking questions and expecting answers to those questions, but you can make observations. You're allowed to engage in a repartee and so on and so forth, You make suggestions. You are given time. Most important of all, you're given time.
And Tan Sri, how much power does the speaker have in terms of, to shape all the things that you just said, to shape the proceedings of the day, to allow for time for debate?
I have been saying this on quite a number of occasions. I think the speaker, to start with, does not have much power. He is bound by the standing orders, just as others are bound by the standing orders. So when you have a special sitting called by the Prime Minister under Standing Order 11, 3, I believe, in this case, then the speaker, as the first premise, has to at least accede to it. But it doesn't say he has to accede to it blindly. I don't think the standing orders can be interpreted that way. Because if you remember, I, as speaker, actually turned down the request by the previous Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir, for Parliament to be reconvened for a special sitting. I turned it down as Speaker because I thought the requirements have not been fulfilled. So you can never say the Speaker is always beholden. It should never be so. The job of the Speaker is to be impartial and to exercise authority. These are the two hallmarks of speakership: impartiality and authority. So even though standing orders may require you to listen to the executive most times, but there are times when you perhaps you will listen, but you can also advise. There's nothing in the standing orders to say that the speaker cannot engage in a dialogue with the Prime Minister or whoever is in charge, with the minister in charge of Parliament or whatever, to engage in a dialogue and try and convince them that it is better to do it this way rather than the current way, because now the country is watching the coming parliamentary proceedings.
Yes. Jansi, can I ask you about that? Because for us watching, it seemed extraordinary that Parliament has been so successfully silenced over 7 months. And despite protestations from parliamentarians, the executive seems to have complete control, that there's no room for resistance. Is this what the design of our parliamentary system has allowed for? Complete dominance of the executive?
No. This is why when you interpret the standing orders as if everything depends on the standing orders, and the standing orders are interpreted literally without taking into account the constitutional context, you get into this sort of problem. You do not seem to recognize the spirit of the Constitution, the spirit of the standing orders, and the spirit of parliamentary democracy. You take the current situation that I was going on about just now, on the laying of or the tabling of the emergency ordinances and the proclamations of emergency. Parliament has a major role to play, but what we are seeing now is just a simple tabling. That's not right. Even if you interpret the standing orders literally, you have also to take into account the constitutional requirements. And the Constitution, under Article 150, Clause 3, requires a tabling for a purpose, for resolutions to be passed, whether to continue the ordinances wholly or partly, or to annul one or more of the ordinances. It presupposes a full debate, a mature debate, and a decision to be taken at the end of it. I mean, this is not something very new, because in 2011, sorry, sorry
to interrupt you. I'd like to understand, what consequences do you see if this special sitting is purely cosmetic?
Well, that is a political question. There will, of course, be political repercussions. we have a problem of trust deficit. It is a pity because government has to lead by example. You have to show to the rakyat that you respect parliamentary democracy, you respect constitutional monarchy, you respect, the advice being given to cabinet that let's have a debate on such and such an issue. And if there is subterfuge, whether blatantly or hidden under the guise of standing orders, then I think there will be a large segment of society who will be not too pleased with this outcome. This country needs healing, and part of the healing process is for people to be more open and more honest about, what parliamentary democracy is about, and we should push forward to have a more mature parliament. And there's nothing wrong with it, because part of the job of parliament and the job of parliamentarians, of course, is to legitimate government action, not just to criticize, but if the government actions pass through this process of scrutiny and at the end of the day people agree with it, there is a legitimating process involved. Government looks much better. But of course,
okay, can I ask you one last question very quickly? Whatever the intentions of the executive in constructing this particular sitting, can parliamentarians, especially the federal opposition, still do things of consequence during the 5 days that would be a benefit to the nation?
I'm sure it will be uppermost in their minds. No one wants to go to parliament to be disruptive. I've been informed, and I think even going by the press report, there's not going to be any vote of no confidence or even a vote of confidence. I don't think they're very interested at the moment to engage in this kind of partisan, hostile, engagement with the government. People are more interested in helping, the government and the cabinet to resolve this horrendous problem that we have now, the COVID-19 pandemic. There are a host of problems, and government cannot take the attitude that we don't like to be disturbed. No. In a parliamentary democracy, government is there to be disturbed so that people can scrutinize, and then not in a negative way. You mustn't take it that way. You must listen to the rakyat. You must listen to the members of parliament who represent the rakyat in a structured way. They may have fantastic solutions to offer, which your ministers may not know or may not even have conceived of it. So listen to them. And at the end of the day, through this process of give and take and debate and discussion, you have a collective wisdom at the end of the day, and solutions will be better. The country will be healed. People, there will not be the trust deficit anymore. So instead of going in, on the premise that opposition is going to create havoc, I think we should look at it differently. You got to think out of the box sometimes, and think of more noble things rather than to hesitate and that the opposition will be there just to create a ruckus or whatever.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time joining us on the show tonight. That was former Dewan Rakyat Speaker Tan Sri Arif Yusof. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this, but more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Untuk COVID menjangkit kita.
Untuk tempoh 2 minggu ini duduk di rumah. Kalau kita boleh laksanakan PKP Kendiri dan keluarga,
saya kira insya-Allah kita boleh berjaya. Akhirnya kita menang.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.esraawani.com atau aplikasi Esra Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face mask, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro Awani sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku kat atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa yang penting di mana sahaja anda berada.
Kerana kita hendak putuskan rantaian jangkitan.
Belanjawan dan pendekatan bertemakan survival ini secara keseluruhan.
Teruskan bersama kami, Astro Awani, saluran berita yang paling dipercayai rakyat Malaysia.
News is a constant. Whatever the time, wherever you are, it will reach you. What's key are its credibility and accuracy. Without bias, with context covering all angles. This is what you'll get on Awani Tonight. We'll brief you the news and views of the day that matter, all in 15 minutes. Weekdays at 9:45 p.m. only on Astro Awani.
Perang COVID.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Sharad and I on Consider This. A special session of Dewan Rakyat will be held for 5 days starting Monday, while Dewan Negara will convene for 3 days beginning the 3rd of August. Now, will this sitting be a consequential practice of parliamentary democracy, or will it be merely cosmetic? Ira Azhari joins us on the show now. She's the manager of the Democracy and Governance Unit for the think tank Ideas, or better known by its full, or with its full name, the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs. Ira, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight. Public expectations are high for this upcoming special sitting of Dewan Rakyat. I mean, especially after Parliament, there's been so many calls for Parliament to reconvene for so many months. I'm just wondering what you would advise the public to kind of keep in mind of what is actually able to be achieved in this 5-day sitting.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me. So I agree with you. It is great that Parliament is reopening at last after so much pressure from the public, from the Malay rulers, from the opposition. So I think the public is, well within their rights to be happy and relieved that there will be this special sitting next Monday. But I would like to ask the public to also manage their expectations a bit. The order paper actually just came out a few hours ago for the Monday sitting, and it is clear now that the sitting will only consist of ministerial briefing sessions, at least Monday. So there will be no motions, and there's also no indication whether debates will even be allowed in the chamber. So in terms of playing that check and balance role on government decisions, I would urge the public to actually manage their expectations a bit, because it will be, I think, a lot of listening by the MPs, and also probably quite a limited time for questions. So
if that was the case, wouldn't it have been just better to have a PDF sent to all MPs? But to be honest, is that what was intended by parliamentarians who have been asking for Parliament to reconvene, from ordinary citizens who have been concerned about the lack of activity in Parliament, and also the Conference of Rulers? Do you think in their statement it suggested that they just want a briefing session by government to the House?
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? If you look at the Malay rulers' statement, the Agong and the Malay rulers' statement, I mean, they were quite clear that Parliament needs to reconvene immediately so the emergency ordinances can be tabled. So the word tabled here, I think, is the key, right? Will there actually be any meaning to this tabling, because tabling actually being late in Parliament actually just means literally the document is on the MP's tables. So it does not. There's no indication, or there's no, you're not forced to then debate it or compelled to do so. So that's the thing, and I think that's obviously inadequate. We have gone through so many months of Parliament being suspended, of ordinances and plans being announced by the government with very, very little to no check and balance whatsoever. So I do think that it is obviously not adequate. And I am looking forward, though, to see what this briefing session is going to entail. Because I don't know if this has ever happened before, this kind of special sitting. Yeah.
So when we were speaking to Tan Sri Arif Yusof a little earlier, he talked about the limitations on the power of the Speaker in terms of shaping the proceedings. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the role of the Speaker for a special sitting, and whether, whether the Speaker has both the legitimacy and the freedom to act independently during critical decision-making moments in this proceeding.
So our Speaker, unlike the one in the Westminster Parliament in London, is not an MP. He was never an MP. So, he was not appointed from the pool of MPs. The Deputy Speakers are, funnily enough, but not the Speaker, right? So, so just by virtue of that, the Speaker of the House is supposed to act as an independent referee, and it's supposed to act in the interest of Parliament as an institution, the August House. So there is an expectation that the Speaker should be independent and sort of act in the spirit of a parliamentary democracy and what the purpose and vision of a parliament is supposed to be, which is an institution that is representative democracy, where Malaysians vote in their MPs to talk about and bring up our interests at a national level. So there is, I think, an expectation for the Speaker to act in this independent manner. Yeah.
Ira, can we talk about the hybrid parliament idea? Because at the moment, I think the last report I read is not all MPs will be allowed into the House. There was some sort of division. I don't know if that's changed. But in terms of having a full attendance using a hybrid system, that's happened in many countries, months ago, a year ago, and yet there's only talk of it happening in Malaysia. What do you think? Do you think enabling laws will be passed in order for that to happen, or are we just going to get yet another postponement of this?
So for there to be this hybrid sitting, the standing orders first needs to be amended. So I'm not an expert on procedural matters, but I do know that the standing orders need to be amended, and that's not something that can be unilaterally decided by the Speaker. Obviously, it needs to be put to a vote. So that is sort of the procedural barrier. But also, looking at the order paper, there doesn't seem to be an indication that the standing orders will be amended or voted on. So I think, procedurally, I think that's one thing. But, on the numbers, you were saying about the news, I think a few days ago, where, only 80 members of Parliament were allowed in. There's also a procedural issue to that. I don't think you can actually disallow MPs from coming into Parliament without there being, an amendment to the standing orders or something like that. So, 220 MPs, are either should all come in with safety procedures in place. Almost all have been vaccinated as well. But also, of course, the best alternative is the hybrid proceedings. But there is the issue with the standing orders there. So, but, if they want to do it, I think they can. And I think they should, actually. Yeah.
Right. Ira, given everything that you've just told us tonight, I'm just wondering whether you think there will likely be an opportunity in this sitting to demonstrate majority.
So to demonstrate majority, the most straightforward way, I think, is to submit a motion of either confidence or no confidence. But I think the time has actually lapsed to submit motions, firstly. And secondly, there are also some legal constitutional opinions that says, a defeat of a major bill can also constitute a vote of no confidence. So, there are opinions out there that says if the emergency ordinance is tabled, debated, and then defeated, that could count as a vote of no confidence. But we now know that at least on the first day, there will not be any, probably not be any debate at all. So I do think it's quite unlikely for there to be this demonstration of majority at this special sitting at least.
I read many years ago, Rais Yatim, who I guess is the head of the Senate now, wrote a book about executive dominance. And Malaysia's democracy has often been marred by the uneven powers between the different branches of government. Do we see in the last 7 months a demonstration of that as well? I mean, that the executive has been so successfully silenced Parliament. Has that been a shock to you?
Well, in terms of the last few months where Parliament has been effectively suspended, definitely it has shown that the executive holds, a large amount of power, unaccountable power. But also, I would also say that even before that, even when we had a functioning Parliament that was, chugging along as usual, I would say that actually our Parliament also did not really fulfill its potential, I guess, in playing that real check and balance role. We never had, many parliamentary select committees. A lot of our MPs, backbenchers and also opposition members are still not members of any parliamentary select committees. So, and our Parliament actually doesn't sit very often. So the number of days our Parliament sits is a lot less than our so-called Commonwealth brother parliaments. So, our Parliament, I think, has a lot of strengthening to do in itself as an institution of check and balance to the executive. So our backbenchers, for example, have not played that role.
Yeah, so there have been a lot of calls for, in fact, select committees to be empowered and so on, for a lot of ideas, but there seems to be resistance, a lack of political will to allow for that to happen. Once this, 5-day sitting is over, what are you looking for as an indicator of the resolve to return Parliament to its proper role, to reinstitute or to animate parliamentary democracy in the country? Or do you see actually a slide towards greater authoritarianism in the coming months?
So ironically, I think the suspension of Parliament and the unpopularity of the current government has somewhat, not in many ways, but somewhat, I think, put them under pressure a bit and has sort of forced them to kind of adhere to some of the public pressure. For example, I think today there was a statement on some new committee that's being formed to advise the government on, Tan Sri Tony Fernandez and other individuals that is in that committee. So I do, and if you look at Datuk Sri Azalina, who then, today released a statement on the Attorney General Chambers. So I do think there is some indication that public pressure is, they do get a sense that public pressure is mounting. So what I'm hoping for, whatever comes out of this 5-day sitting, the next sitting I believe is in September, hopefully Malaysians, we ourselves as Malaysians have a greater awareness of what Parliament is supposed to be and what our MPs are supposed to be doing, which is, debating policy and enacting laws in Parliament. So I am hopeful a bit in that sense, yeah.
Ira, thank you for joining us on the show. That was Ira Azhari from Ideas, wrapping up this edition of Consider This. Before we leave you tonight, don't forget that you can get all the latest information on COVID-19 vaccines at astroawani.com as well as the Astro Awani app. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Have a lovely weekend, folks. Good night.
Good night.
Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals like John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
He said to me, Klaus can get away with murder.
Dr. Death, the undoctored story.
This guy's dangerous.
And Epstein's shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
There was this whole other world going on.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Buried in the Backyard and Snapped. And with the Dateline 24/7 channel that's always on.
Did you want her dead?
You can't not obsess. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.